The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Meridian Hotel cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Celeste Harper adjusted her emerald bridesmaid dress for the 100th time that evening. She tugged at the plunging neckline, completely out of her comfort zone, in the elegant ballroom filled with Ruby's wealthy friends in their designer gowns. "Stop fidgeting, Cel." Ruby Chen laughed, her wedding dress sparkling as she spun around. "You look absolutely stunning tonight," Celeste managed. A weak smile. She'd rather be home with a good book than surrounded by champagne-fueled strangers making small talk about stock portfolios and exotic vacations. The only reason she'd agreed to be maid of honor was because Ruby had been her roommate and closest friend for 3 years. "I still can't believe you're married now," Celeste said, watching Ruby's new husband James sweep her onto the dance floor. "It feels like yesterday you were crying over burnt pasta in our tiny apartment." "That's what happens when you find your person," Ruby called back over the orchestra music. "Maybe tonight will be your turn to meet someone special." Celeste rolled her eyes and made her way to the bar, desperate for something to calm her nerves. The bartender handed her a glass of wine, and she found a quiet corner to observe the festivities. She checked her phone only 9 o'clock. The reception would go on for hours. Meanwhile, 3 floors above in the hotel's executive suite, Dante Romano loosened his black tie and stared out at the city skyline. His father Harrison had arranged another business dinner, code for introducing him to the daughter of a potential merger partner. The Richardson family controlled a significant portion of the West Coast shipping industry, and Harrison was convinced that marrying their daughter would secure the deal. "I won't be paraded around like a prize bull," Dante muttered to his reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 32, he'd built Romano Enterprises into a tech empire worth billions. But his father still treated him like a child who couldn't make his own decisions. His phone buzzed with a text from Nolan Cross. His best friend and business partner. "Escape route ready. Service elevator to the parking garage. Your Aston Martin is waiting." Dante grinned. Nolan always had his back, grabbed his jacket and slipped out of the suite, taking the service elevator down. But instead of heading to the parking garage, he found himself drawn to the sounds of music and laughter coming from one of the ballrooms. He'd had enough of stuffy business dinners for one lifetime. The ballroom doors were propped open and elegant. Guests moved between the dance floor and cocktail tables. Dante smoothed his hair and walked in confidently, assuming it was some corporate event he could blend into for an hour or two. That's when he saw her. A woman in an emerald dress stood alone near the windows, her long chestnut hair cascading over one shoulder as she gazed out at the city lights. There was something magnetic about her stillness in the midst of all the celebration. Unlike the other guest who seemed desperate to see and be seen, she appeared content in her solitude. Dante found himself walking toward her before he'd made a conscious decision to do so. "Beautiful view," he said, coming to stand beside her at the window. Celeste startled, nearly spilling her wine. She turned to find herself face to face with the most striking man she'd ever seen. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and intense gray eyes that seemed to look right through her. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored and everything about him radiated confidence and power. "Oh yes," she managed, her cheeks flushing. "I love seeing the city from up here. It makes all the chaos down there look so peaceful." "You're not enjoying the party?" Dante asked, intrigued by her soft voice and the way she seemed almost shy despite her stunning appearance. "It's not really my scene," Celeste admitted. "I'm more of a quiet evening at home type of person. Books, tea, maybe. Some classical music. This is all for my roommate. Well, former roommate now. She just got married. Congratulations to her," Dante said, though he was far more interested in learning about the mysterious woman before him. "I'm Dante." "Celeste," she replied, accepting his outstretched hand. The moment their skin touched, she felt a jolt of electricity that made her breath catch. "Would you like to dance, Celeste?" he asked, still holding her hand. She hesitated. "I'm not very good at it." "Neither am I," he lied smoothly. "We can figure it out together." Before she could protest, he was leading her onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic, and Dante pulled her gently into his arms. She fit perfectly against him, her head just reaching his shoulder. "You're trembling," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "I don't usually do this," she whispered back. "Dance with strangers, I mean. What do you usually do?" "Work at the library, read. Help my sister with her college applications." "Very exciting stuff," she said with self-deprecating humor. Dante found her honesty refreshing. Most women he met were either trying to impress him with their accomplishments or their connections. Celeste seemed genuinely unaware of her own appeal. As the song ended, neither of them stepped apart. The ballroom suddenly felt too crowded, too loud. "Would you like to get some air?" Dante asked. Celeste knew she should say no. She should return to her corner, finish her wine, and wait for Ruby to cut the cake so she could politely leave. Instead, she found herself nodding. He led her through a side door, onto a private balcony overlooking the hotel's gardens. The night air was cool against her skin, and the sounds of the party faded to a distant murmur. "This is better," Dante said, leaning against the stone railing. "Tell me about these books you love so much." For the next hour, they talked about everything and nothing. Celeste found herself opening up to this stranger in a way she never did with people she'd known for years. He listened intently as she described her work at the university library, her dreams of maybe writing a novel someday, her close relationship with her younger sister Grace. Dante was equally captivated. He found himself sharing details about his life he'd never told anyone, his complicated relationship with his father, the pressure of running a multi-billion-dollar company, his loneliness despite being constantly surrounded by people. "I should probably get back," Celeste said eventually, though she made no move to leave. "Ruby will wonder where I disappeared to." "Stay," Dante said quietly. "Just a little longer." The way he looked at her made her heart race. There was an intensity in his gray eyes that both thrilled and terrified her. She'd never felt anything like this before, this overwhelming attraction to someone she'd just met. "I don't know what you're doing to me," she whispered. "I was just thinking the same thing," he replied, stepping closer. "I came here to escape, and instead I found you." When he cupped her face in his hands, she didn't pull away. When he lowered his head to kiss her, she rose up to meet him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as she melted against him. "Come upstairs with me," he said against her lips. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was crazy. She didn't do one-night stands. She barely dated at all. But something about Dante made her want to throw caution to the wind. She breathed. The elevator ride to his suite felt like an eternity. They stood on opposite sides of the car, the tension between them electric. When the doors opened, Dante took her hand and led her down the hallway. His suite was enormous, larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and elegant furniture filled the spacious rooms. "This is incredible," Celeste said, walking to the windows. "It's just a hotel room," Dante replied, coming up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and she leaned back against his chest. "Not to someone like me," she said softly. He turned her in his arms, studying her face in the moonlight streaming through the windows. "Someone like you? I work 2 jobs just to make rent," she said. "I've never stayed anywhere fancier than a roadside motel. This is like something out of a fairy tale." The vulnerability in her voice made something tighten in Dante's chest. He tilted her chin up and kissed her again, pouring all his unspoken feelings into it. What happened next was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced. When Dante discovered she was a virgin, he was incredibly gentle, taking his time to make sure she felt safe and cherished. For Celeste, giving herself to him felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled in the silk, sheets her head on his chest as he traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I should go," she whispered, though she made no move to leave his arms. "Stay until morning," he murmured into her hair.
Yes.
"Please." She did stay, falling asleep to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. But when dawn broke through the windows, reality came crashing back. Celeste slipped out of bed, gathered her dress, and quietly got dressed. Dante stirred as she reached for the door handle. "Celeste?" She turned back, memorizing every detail of his face in the morning light. "Thank you for last night. It was perfect." "Wait," he said, sitting up. "Let me drive you home. We could have breakfast." "I can't," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "This was just one night. We both know that." She pulled out her phone and quickly entered her number into his. "If you want to call sometime, you can, but I understand if you don't." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the warmth of her memory. Dante stared at the closed door for a long moment, then looked at his phone. Under contacts, she'd simply written Celeste with a heart emoji. He had no idea that one night would change everything, or that he was already falling for a woman whose world was completely different from his own. All he knew was that he had to see her again. The hunt was about to begin. 2 weeks had passed since that night at the Grand Meridian Hotel, and Dante Romano couldn't get Celeste Harper out of his mind. He'd called her number countless times, but it went straight to voicemail each time. The sweet voice that answered said she was unavailable, but would return calls when possible. She never did. Dante stood in his corner office on the 40th floor of Romano Tower, staring out at the city below. His usually sharp focus had been replaced by an obsession he couldn't shake. He'd closed 3 major deals this week, but all he could think about was the way Celeste had felt in his arms, the soft sighs she'd made, the trust she'd placed in him. "You look terrible," Nolan Cross said, entering the office with 2 cups of coffee. "When's the last time you slept?" "I don't need sleep. I need answers," Dante replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I want you to find her." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Find who? The mystery woman from the hotel?" "Dante, maybe she doesn't want to be found. Some people value their privacy. She gave me her number. She wouldn't have done that if she didn't want me to contact her." Dante pulled out his phone and showed Nolan the contact entry. "Look at this." Shh. Added a heart emoji. "That means something." "Or she was being polite after a one-night stand," Nolan said carefully. "Look, I know this is unlike you, but maybe you should let this go. There are plenty of other women." "I don't want other women," Dante snapped. "I want her." There was something different about Celeste, something real. "I've never felt like that with anyone before." Nolan studied his best friend's face. In all their years together, he'd never seen Dante this affected by a woman. "All right, I'll make some calls. But I'm doing this as your friend, not because I think it's a good idea." Meanwhile, across the city in a small apartment above Chen's bookstore, Celeste sat on her bathroom floor, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Positive. No, 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 she whispered, dropping the test as if it were on fire. This can't be happening. She'd taken 3 tests over the past 2 days, hoping the first 2 were false positives. But the evidence was undeniable. She was carrying Dante Romano's child, though she still didn't know his last name or anything about his life beyond that magical night they'd shared. Grace Harper knocked on the bathroom door. "Cell, are you okay in there? You've been really quiet lately." "I'm fine," Celeste called back, quickly gathering the pregnancy tests and shoving them into the trash. "Just tired from work." But she wasn't fine. She was terrified. At 24, she was barely making ends meet with her 2 jobs. The idea of raising a child alone seemed impossible. And how could she contact Dante with news like this? He'd probably think she was trying to trap him. Over the next few days, Celeste threw herself into her work at the university library and the bookstore, trying to avoid thinking about her situation. But the nausea that hit her each morning made it impossible to forget. "You're glowing," said Mrs. Patterson, one of the library's regular patrons. "Are you in love, dear?" If only it were that simple, Celeste thought. She managed a weak smile and helped Mrs. Patterson find the romance novels she was looking for. That afternoon, Celeste was organizing returned books. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Celeste. This is Detective Morrison from the NYPD. I need to ask you some questions about your whereabouts 2 weeks ago." Celeste's blood ran cold. "What? I don't understand. Am I in trouble?" "No, ma'am. We're investigating a case involving the Grand Meridian Hotel, and your name came up in our inquiry. Could you come down to the station?" I can't leave work right now." "Can this wait until tomorrow?" "Of course. But please don't leave the city until we've spoken." After hanging up, Celeste's hands shook as she tried to process what was happening. Had something happened at Ruby's wedding? Was this connected to Dante somehow? Unknown to Celeste, Dante's private investigator had been making inquiries at the hotel, trying to track down anyone who might have information about the mysterious woman in the emerald dress. Hotel security had reviewed footage and identified her as someone who'd attended the Chen Morrison wedding reception. The investigation had attracted the attention of actual police, who were now following up on what they assumed was a missing persons case. The next morning, Dante's investigator called with news. I found her, Mr. Romano. Celeste Harper, age 24. She works at the Columbia University Library and part-time at Chin's bookstore in the village. She lives in the apartment above the bookstore with her younger sister. Dante felt a rush of triumph mixed with relief. Give me the address. Sir, are you sure about this? She might have had reasons for not returning your calls. But Dante was already grabbing his keys. He'd waited long enough. Chen's bookstore was a cozy little shop, squeezed between a coffee house and a vintage clothing store. Through the large front window, Dante could see shelves packed with books and a small cafe area with mismatched chairs and tables. Right. It was exactly the kind of place he imagined Celeste would love. He pushed open the door, setting off a small bell. The scent of coffee and old books filled his nostrils as he looked around for any sign of her. Can I help you? Asked a young woman with short black hair behind the counter. She looked like a younger version of Celeste. I'm looking for Celeste Harper. Grace's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Who's asking? A friend. Dante Romano. Dante. Celeste's voice came from behind a tall bookshelf. What are you doing here? She appeared around the corner, wearing a simple blue dress and cardigan, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked pale and tired, but still beautiful enough to take his breath away. I've been trying to call you, he said, his voice softer. Then he'd intended, your phone goes straight to voicemail. No. Celeste glanced at Grace, who was watching the interaction with interest. Grace, could you give us a minute? Grace reluctantly disappeared into the back room, though Dante suspected she was listening from behind the door. How did you find me? Celeste asked, wrapping her arms around herself. Does it matter? I needed to see you again. Dante stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back. That night meant something to me, Celeste. I think it meant something to you, too. It was one night, she said quietly. A beautiful night, but just one night. Doesn't have to be. Dante reached out to touch her arm, and she flinched away. Have dinner with me. Let me take you somewhere nice, somewhere we can talk. I can't. Can't or won't. Celeste closed her eyes, feeling overwhelmed. She needed to tell him about the pregnancy, but not here. Not like this. Dante, you don't understand. We're from completely different worlds. You drive an expensive car. You stay in hotel suites that cost more than I make in a month. What happened? Between us was magical, but it wasn't real life. It was real to me, he said fiercely. It's more real than anything else in my life. Before she could respond, the bell above the door chimed again. Harrison Romano entered the bookstore, his silver hair perfectly styled and his tailored coat screaming money and power. Two large men in dark suits flanked him. There you are, Dante Harrison, said coolly. When you didn't show up for the Richardson dinner, I had my people track your phone. Imagine my surprise to find you in this quaint little establishment. Dante's jaw clenched. Father, what are you doing here? Cleaning up your mess as usual. Harrison's cold gaze swept over Celeste. Dismissively, Miss Harper, I presume. I understand you've been distracting my son from his responsibilities. Celeste felt like she'd been slapped. I'm sorry, who are you? Harrison Romano, CEO of Romano Enterprises. And you, my dear, are a problem that needs to be solved. Father, stop, Dante warned, but Harrison continued. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 to disappear from my son's life permanently, cash untraceable, enough to improve your circumstances considerably. The blood drained from Celeste's face. You think I'm some kind of gold digger? I think you're a nobody who happened to catch my son's attention at a vulnerable moment, Harrison replied coldly. But vulnerable moments pass. Business empires don't. Dante stepped between them. Get out now. Not without you, Harrison said. The Richardson deal is worth $2 billion, Dante. Their daughter Charlotte is intelligent, accomplished, and from our world. She won't embarrass you at board meetings or charity galas. I don't care about Charlotte Richardson or her father's shipping company, Dante said through gritted teeth. Harrison's expression hardened. Then you care even less about this company than I thought. Perhaps it's time to consider other options for succession. The threat hung in the air like poison. Dante had spent his entire adult life building Romano Enterprises into what it was today. The idea of losing it, of letting his father hand it over to some corporate yes-man was almost unbearable. But when he looked at Celeste's stricken face, he realized something else was unbearable too, losing her. Marry me, he said suddenly. Both Celeste and Harrison stared at him in shock. What? Celeste whispered. Marry me, Dante repeated, turning to face her fully. I know it sounds crazy. We've known each other for 2 weeks, but I can't stop thinking about you. I can't sleep, can't focus on work, can't imagine my life without you in it. Dante, you can't be serious, Harrison said, his face red with anger. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Dante took Celeste's hands in his. I'm not saying it would be easy. Our worlds are different, but we could bridge that gap together. I have enough money to take care of you, your sister, whatever you need. You'd never have to worry about anything again. Celeste felt tears welling up in her eyes. Part of her wanted to say yes, wanted to believe in fairy tales and happy endings. But the practical part of her, the part that had been taken care of, herself and Grace for years, knew better. I can't, she whispered. This is insane. You don't marry someone after one night. Then give me more nights, Dante pleaded. Give me a chance to prove this could work. It can't work, Celeste said, pulling her hands free. Look around you, Dante. Look at your father's face. Look at those bodyguards. This is your world? Power plays and business deals and people like me being bought off. I won't be part of that. She turned and ran toward the back of the store, leaving Dante standing alone with his father. Wise girl, Harrison said coldly. Perhaps there's hope for you yet, son. But Dante wasn't listening. He was staring at the doorway where Celeste had disappeared, feeling like his heart had been ripped from his chest. In the back room, Celeste collapsed into Grace's arms, sobbing. What just happened out there? Grace asked, stroking her sister's hair. I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life, Celeste whispered. Or maybe I just saved myself from making one. I can't tell anymore. As Harrison Romano's limousine pulled away from the curb, Dante made a decision. His father was wrong about Celeste, and he was wrong about what mattered in life. Some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant risking everything else. The pursuit was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, but what Dante didn't know was that Celeste was carrying his child. That revelation would change everything once again. 1 month had passed since the confrontation at Chun's bookstore, and Dante Romano's pursuit of Celeste Harper had become the stuff of legend. Among New York's elite, flowers arrived at the bookstore daily, not ostentatious arrangements, but simple bouquets of her favorite peonies that he'd somehow discovered she loved. Books appeared on her doorstep, first editions of classic novels she'd mentioned during their brief time together. He'd even anonymously paid off her sister Grace's college tuition, though Celeste had figured out the source immediately. But it was the letters that affected her most. Handwritten notes that arrived with the flowers, sharing pieces of his soul she never expected to see. He wrote about his loneliness growing up in a mansion with absent parents, about the pressure of carrying the Romano legacy, about how meeting her had shown him what genuine connection felt like. Celeste kept every letter in a shoebox under her bed, reading them over and over again despite herself. You're glowing again, Grace observed one morning as they shared coffee in their tiny kitchen, and not in the good way. You look exhausted. Celeste touched her still flat stomach unconsciously. At 8 weeks pregnant, the morning sickness had intensified, and she was running out of excuses for her frequent bathroom breaks and general fatigue. I'm fine, she lied, the same response she'd been giving for weeks. You're not fine, and this whole situation with Dante Romano is driving you crazy. Why don't you just talk to him? Because talking leads to complications, Celeste said, thinking about the secret she was carrying. Sometimes it's better to leave things alone. But fate had other plans. That afternoon, Celeste was helping a customer find a book on medieval history. The bookstore's bell chimed. She looked up to see a woman in an expensive burgundy coat and perfectly styled blonde hair approaching the counter. Celeste Harper? The woman asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Yes, I'm Charlotte Richardson. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance. Celeste's stomach dropped. This was the woman Harrison Romano wanted his son to marry, the shipping heiress who came from the right world. If you're here to warn me away from Dante, you're wasting your time, Celeste said quietly. I'm not seeing him. Oh, I know, Charlotte replied, her smile becoming more genuine. But that doesn't mean he's given up on you. Do you have any idea what you've done to that man? Celeste felt heat rise in her cheeks. I haven't done anything to him, haven't you? Charlotte moved closer to the counter. He's turned down 3 major business deals because they conflicted with his daily flower deliveries. He missed his own company's board meeting last week. Because he was sitting in the coffee shop across the street hoping to catch a glimpse of you. His father is furious, and maybe you should talk to him, not me. I tried. He told me he's not interested in marrying me because he's already found the woman he wants to spend his life with. Charlotte's expression softened. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. Actually, I'm relieved. The last thing I want is to marry a man who's in love with someone else. Celeste's breath caught. Said he was in love with me. Those weren't his exact words, but it was written all over his face. Charlotte glanced around the cozy bookstore. I can see why he's drawn to you. This place, this life, it's authentic in a way our world rarely is. Your world, Celeste corrected. I don't belong in it. Maybe not. Or maybe you could change it for the better. Charlotte pulled out her phone and showed Celeste a news article. Have you seen this? The headline read, Romano Enterprises stock drops amid CEO's mysterious behavior. The article speculated about Dante's recent erratic patterns and included quotes from unnamed sources suggesting he was having some kind of breakdown. His father is using this to push for a leadership change, Charlotte explained. If Dante doesn't stabilize soon, he could lose everything he's worked for. Celeste felt sick. I never wanted to hurt him. Then don't let him destroy himself over. You either give him a real chance or end this completely. The limbo you're keeping him in is killing him. After Charlotte left, Celeste spent the rest of the day in turmoil. That evening, she finally worked up the courage to call the number Dante had given her weeks ago. Celeste. His voice was rough, as if he'd been sleeping. We need to talk, she said. But not at the bookstore. Somewhere private. I'll send a car? No. Meet me at Riverside Park, near the boat basin. 1 hour. The autumn air was crisp as Celeste. Waited on a bench overlooking the Hudson River. She'd rehearsed what she wanted to say a dozen times. But when she saw Dante walking toward her, all her carefully planned words disappeared. He looked thinner. Then she remembered, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw her, his face lit up with such hope that it nearly broke her heart. Thank you for calling, he said, sitting beside her, but maintaining careful distance. I was starting to think I'd never hear your voice again. Dante, we can't. Keep doing this, Celeste said, staring out at the water. You're destroying your life over someone you barely know. I know you better than you think. I know you bite your lip when you're nervous, like you're doing right now. I know you take your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. I know you read the endings of books first when you're anxious about how they'll turn out. Celeste turned to look at him. How could you possibly know that? Because I pay attention. Because every detail about you matters to me. He reached over and gently took her hand. I know you're scared of what's between us. Hell, I'm terrified too. But running from it isn't going to make it go away. There's something I need to tell you, Celeste said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she could continue, a black van screeched to a halt on the nearby road. 4 men in dark clothing jumped out and began running toward them. Get down, Dante shouted, pushing Celeste behind the bench as the first man reached them. Everything happened so fast. Dante fought off 2 of the attackers while shouting at Celeste to run, but she was frozen in terror. One of the men grabbed her arm and began dragging her toward the van. Let her go, Dante roared, but a blow to his head sent him stumbling. This is what happens when you don't listen to warnings, Romano, one of the attackers said. Your father's business rivals send their regards. As they forced Celeste into the van, she screamed Dante's name. The last thing she saw was him struggling to his feet, blood trickling down his face. His phone pressed to his ear. The warehouse they took her to was cold and smelled of rust and motor oil. They tied her to a chair in a small office overlooking the main floor, where she could see dozens of shipping containers stacked like building blocks. Nothing personal, sweetheart, said the man who seemed to be in charge. But Romano's been getting too comfortable, expanding into our territory. Sometimes you have to hit a man where it hurts most to get his attention. Celeste's mind raced. She thought about the baby growing inside her. About Grace, waiting for her at home. About Dante and the look of devastation on his face as she was taken. Hours passed before she heard vehicles outside. The warehouse doors burst open, and she watched from above as Dante stormed in with a team of security personnel. He moved like a man possessed, systematically searching every corner until he found the office where they were holding her. "Hurt her? I'll destroy every one of you," he said coldly to her captors. "The girl's fine," the leader replied. "For now. But the price for her freedom just went up." "Name it." "Romano Enterprises shipping contracts. It's all of them. Sign them over to us," and she walks away. Dante's jaw clenched. Those contracts were worth hundreds of millions and formed the backbone of several major business relationships.
Ow, Lucy.
Them would cripple his company and likely cost him his position as CEO. "Done," he said without hesitation. "Dante, no," Celeste called out.
Ow!
"I'm not worth destroying your life over." He looked up at her, and the love in his eyes was unmistakable. "We're worth everything to me." The exchange happened quickly. Legal documents were signed electronically, contracts were transferred, and Celeste was released. But as they prepared to leave, the leader of the kidnappers made one final revelation. "Your father sends his regards, by the way. He's the one who told us where to find you tonight." Dante went very still. "What did you say?" Harrison Romano arranged. "This whole thing. Figured if his son's little girlfriend disappeared permanently, you'd come to your senses about the Richardson marriage. We were just supposed to scare her, but when you showed up, we saw an opportunity for a bigger payday." The ride back to the city was tense and silent. Celeste sat pressed against the car door, trying to process everything that had happened. Stared straight ahead, his hands clenched into fists. "Your father tried to have me killed," she said finally. "Kidnapped," Dante corrected grimly. "But yes, and he'll pay for it." "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Celeste said, tears streaming down her face. "Your world is dangerous, Dante. People get hurt. People like me don't survive in it. You survived tonight? Barely. And at what cost? You just gave up hundreds of millions of dollars for me. Your father will probably disown you. The board will remove you as CEO. I don't care. You should care." Celeste turned to face him. "Company is your life's work." "No," Dante said quietly. "You are." They sat in silence as the car pulled up to Celeste's building. Before getting out, she turned to him one last time. "I'm pregnant," she said. Dante's world stopped. "What?" "I'm 8 weeks pregnant. It happened that night at the hotel. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, but with everything that's happened," she wiped her eyes. "I thought you should know." She was out of the car and running up the stairs to her apartment before he could respond. Dante sat in stunned silence for several minutes, then told his driver to take him home. But instead of going to his penthouse, he drove to his father's estate in the Hamptons. Harrison Romano was in his study, enjoying a late-night brandy, when Dante burst through the doors. "You tried to have her killed," Dante said, his voice deadly. "Quiet." "I tried to solve a problem," Harrison replied calmly, "though I'm disappointed in how it was handled. I specifically said no permanent harm. She's carrying your grandchild." Harrison's brandy glass paused halfway to his lips. "Excuse me? Celeste is pregnant with my baby, your grandchild, and you tried to have her kidnapped." For the first time in years, Harrison Romano looked genuinely shaken. I didn't know it wouldn't have mattered if you had." Dante stepped closer to his father's desk. "I'm done, Dad. Done with your manipulations, your schemes, your complete disregard for anyone who doesn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable. I'm choosing her. You can't be serious. The company will survive without me if it has to, but I won't survive without her." Dante turned toward the door. "Consider this my resignation as your son." The next morning, Celeste woke to find Grace standing by her bed with a concerned expression. "There's someone here to see you," Grace said. "He says it's urgent." Celeste expected to find Dante in their small living room, but instead discovered Nolan Cross holding a large bouquet of white roses. "Ms. Harper, I'm Nolan Cross, Dante's business partner and best friend. May I sit down?" Celeste nodded, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "Dante's gone," Nolan said without preamble. "Gone where?" "He's disappeared. Left his phone, his credit cards, everything. The only thing he took was his passport and a bag of clothes. His doorman said he left around 3 this morning." Celeste felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Did something happen with his father? They had a confrontation last night. The security footage shows Dante leaving Harrison's estate around midnight, but that's the last anyone saw of him. Nolan leaned forward. "He left these flowers and this letter for you." With trembling hands, Celeste opened the envelope. My dearest Celeste, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not because I don't love you, I love you more than I ever thought possible, but because you were right about my world being dangerous. Last night proved that anyone close to me becomes a target. I can't ask you to live in fear. I can't put our child at risk. So I'm removing myself from the equation. I've transferred enough money into an account under your name to ensure you and the baby never want for anything. Nolan has the details. I know you'll be an amazing mother. I wish I could be there to see it all. My love, Dante P. S. I hope our child has your eyes. Celeste crumpled the letter, fury replacing her shock. Where did he go? I don't know. But I have a theory. Nolan pulled out his phone and showed her a news article. This morning, Harrison Romano was arrested by the FBI on charges of conspiracy and racketeering. It turns out those men who kidnapped you weren't just business rivals. They were connected to several illegal shipping operations that Harrison's been involved with for years. Dante turned in his own father. Evidence was delivered to the FBI anonymously around 4 a.m. Financial records, recorded conversations, shipping manifests. Years' worth of documentation. Harrison's going to prison for a long time. Celeste stared at the article, pieces clicking into place. He thinks I'll be safer with his father gone. Probably. But he's wrong about needing to disappear himself. With Harrison arrested and his criminal associates being rounded up, the danger's past. Then we have to find him. Nolan smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. It took them 3 days to track down Dante. He'd flown to a small coastal town in Ireland, where he'd rented a cottage overlooking the sea. When Celeste knocked on his door, he stared at her like she was a ghost. You found me, he said quietly. Did you really think I wouldn't? She pushed past him into the cottage. We need to talk. The cottage was sparse but comfortable, with a fireplace and windows facing the ocean. Dante looked like he hadn't slept since leaving New York. You shouldn't be here, he said. It's not safe. Your father's in prison. Celeste interrupted. His associates are being arrested. The FBI has everything they need to shut down the entire operation. Nolan filled me in on the flight over. Dante sank into a chair by the fireplace. I couldn't take the risk. Not with you. Not with our baby.
Our
Baby? Celeste repeated, sitting across from him. You're really okay with this? It's me being pregnant after one night together? I'm terrified, Dante admitted. I don't know anything about being a father, but I want to learn. Want to be there for every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, every first word and first step. He looked at her with desperate hope. If you'll let me. Celeste reached across the space between them and took his hands. I'm terrified too. But I love you, Dante. I think I started falling for you that first night on the balcony. And everything since then has just made it stronger, even after everything that's happened. The kidnapping, my father, the danger I brought into your life, especially after all of that. You gave up everything for me, your business, relationships, your fortune, your family. No one's ever put me first like that before. Dante pulled her out of her chair and into his lap, holding her close. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Ah, good, Celeste said, cupping his face in her hands. Because I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Marry me. Dante's eyebrows rose. I thought I was supposed to ask you that. You did ask. I said no. Now I'm asking you. Celeste smiled. We'll figure out the rest as we go along. But I want to build a life with you, Dante. A real life. Not the fantasy version your father wanted, or the impossible fairy tale I was afraid of. Just us, and our baby, and whatever comes next. What about the company, Romano Enterprises? It'll be fine under Nolan's leadership until you decide what you want to do. Maybe you'll go back. Maybe you'll start something new. Maybe you'll become a stay-at-home dad who reads stories to our children in the afternoon. I don't care what you do for work, as long as you come home to me at night. Dante kissed her then, pouring all his love and relief and hope for the future into it. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. Is that a yes? Celeste asked. That's a yes to everything, Dante replied. It's to marriage, to the baby, to building a life together, wherever that leads us. Good, because I've already planned the wedding. Have you now? Small ceremony? Just us and Grace and Nolan? Maybe Ruby and her husband, if we can track them down? Right here in Ireland, overlooking the sea. Celeste grinned. I figure if we're going to start over, we might as well do it somewhere beautiful. 3 months later, Celeste Harper became Celeste Romano in a small ceremony on the cliffs overlooking the Irish Sea. She wore a simple white dress that accommodated her growing belly, and Dante couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the entire service. Grace served as maid of honor, Nolan as best man, and Ruby flew in from her honeymoon in Italy to be there for her best friend's happy ending as they exchanged vows. Dante promised to love and protect Celeste and their children for the rest of his life. Celeste promised to be his anchor in storms and his companion in adventure. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, casting everything in golden light. 6 months later, they welcomed their daughter, Isabella Rose Romano, into the world. She had Dante's dark hair and Celeste's warm brown eyes. She was absolutely perfect. They split their time between New York, where Dante had returned to lead Romano Enterprises, now completely legitimate and more profitable than ever, and their cottage in Ireland, where they went whenever they needed to remember what really mattered. Grace enrolled at Columbia University and lived in their penthouse apartment. When they were traveling, Harrison Romano died in prison 2 years later. And while Dante grieved the father he'd never really had, he was grateful his children would never know that kind of cold, calculating love. Ruby and James remained close friends, and their children grew up together like cousins. Nolan eventually married a lovely woman he met at Isabella's christening, and became the baby's honorary uncle. As for Celeste and Dante, their love only grew stronger with time. They had 2 more children, twin boys named Gabriel and Sebastian, and filled their homes with laughter, books, and the kind of deep, abiding joy that comes from finding your perfect match in an imperfect world. Years later, when people asked how they'd known they were meant to be together after just one night, Celeste would smile and say that sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind hasn't figured out yet. And Dante would add that the best things in life are worth fighting for, even when, especially when the odds seem impossible. Their story became legendary in their circle, proof that love could conquer anything, even billion-dollar empires and family expectations and the vast differences between 2 people's worlds. But to them, it was simply the story of how they found each other in a crowded ballroom and decided to never let go.